Who cares? Just learn.
Yeah.
It's
David's birthday, so we're gonna have just for Chavdal Tevis, the Alter Rebbe's Yahrtzeit.
I'll read the headline.
You want to read? You want to read the whole thing?
I had to give you the whole paragraph. I said I was going to read the headline.
Echad ha'taimim lakach
We're waiting for you.
sheyeshnam tzaddikim sheyem mistalkusam v'yem simcha. The idea that we celebrate the Yahrtzeit of a tzaddik is not true across the board. It doesn't apply everywhere. So, for example, if a person opens up a big Shulchan Aruch, you'll see over there that Zayin Adar on the 7th of Adar, which is the Yahrtzeit of Moshe Rabbeinu, it's a fast day. We also learn in Shulchan Aruch that why didn't they establish Yud Nisan as a celebration of Lamaki Mitzrayim B'Chareim when the firstborn of the Egyptians killed their own people, which was the day of the actual miracle? Why did we establish that on Shabbos HaGadol and not on Yud Nisan? Because Yud Nisan is the Yahrtzeit of Miriam. It's even brought down in some Svarim about that they used to fast on that day, even though it's Chodesh Nisan, which is a Pella. So we see that there are many tzaddikim that we actually mark their day not with joy. Right? But there are other tzaddikim, as we're soon going to point out, the Alter Rebbe is one of those, that we mark the day of the Yahrtzeit as a day of rejoicing. How come? Why is that way? Why is it that way that tzaddikim, the day of their passing is a day of rejoicing? The mission, the purpose that the Neshomah came down here below is completed on the day of the passing. When we're dealing with a tzaddik didn't waste his time. So he was here on a mission, he was here on a job, he came to do his job, he completed his job. Mission accomplished. You had a rocket go to the moon, it came back, everybody was safe and sound, you applaud. It's a time of celebration. The tzaddik completed his job, he was sent down here, he did it, he turned around, boom. It's a very happy occasion. The Rebbe says on footnote number 1 that in other places he talks about why then don't we say by all tzaddikim, and essentially the Rebbe explains in other places that by tzaddikim that were not involved in Pnimius HaTorah, in the inner part of the Torah, so it was not visible by them in their passing, the inner meaning of the passing. So all we see is just the loss of the tzaddik. But those tzaddikim that were involved with the inner part of the Torah, like Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, who wrote the Zohar, who authored the Zohar, the Rabbeim, the Alter Rebbe, and so on, they were involved with the inner part of the Torah. So therefore, we celebrate and we mark the day because they revealed with their lives the inner purpose and the inner meaning of a life of a Yid. So therefore, on the day of their passing, it's a time to celebrate. What does it mean? He explains this more at length now. One of the favorite statements of the Rebbe, one of the favorite axioms is that every descent is for the sake of an ascent. Any descent that the Neshomah went through, could be in the highest, most levels in Gan Eden before it came down into the body. But the purpose of coming down here was to be able to have ROI, return on your investment, to be able to gain more than what it had before. If it's just going to return back to Gan Eden in the same way as it was before it came down, so there was no gain. There was no purpose in it. But the Neshama comes down here to be able to gain a higher level and a greater level than what it had before it came down. Because before it came down, it was called Chatzuvis Metachas Kisei HaKavod. It was hewn out from under the throne of glory. It was Tahoirehi, like we say every morning in Shachris, we say, Neshama Shanasata bi Tahoirehi, Atabarasati, Yitzarta, Tamfachtabi, but Tahoira is the purest level of the Neshama. That's where the Neshama came from before Hashem brought it down to this world, created it, formed it, and blew it into us. Still in all, even though it was that state of Tahoirehi, it was so pure, Olamaylam is even higher than that. Still in all, that it reaches so much more higher than it was previously. Aliyas Neshomah ba kishemesayemes kol avidasa shaysim utelas alel lasis lamata. It doesn't come piecemeal. Of course, there are things that are accomplished day by day, moment by moment. But the true accomplishment, the true ascent, the true elevation occurs once we have the entire mission. That's the Alter Rebbe speaks about it in Tanya, in the Yahrtzeit HaKodesh, in Chav Zayin, Chav Ches, that at the end of the Tzaddik's life, all of the avodah that the Tzaddik did now has a cumulative power. It has an energy that's derived from combining all of it together, which is much more than each individual accomplishment. And therefore, at the end of the Tzaddik's life, when it finished and it completed everything, so the entire power and energy of its entire life of 120 years of doing Torah mitzvahs has this great, awesome power, and it attains a very, very high level. And also the Rebbe says this not just is for the neshama itself, but it also draws down brachas and it draws down assistance to all those that are following in this neshama's path. Well, lefichach nechshavas eistalkas hatzadikim l'simcha ki hatzadikim harivadai palu v'siyum ukol avidasam. When it's an ordinary person, you don't know. Maybe not. Could be they completed their mission. Could be, they were given a set amount of years, and they may not have completed their mission. So, by an ordinary person, there's no necessary reason to celebrate. At Tzaddik, we know that they definitely accomplished their mission. That comes about because of accomplishing what they did in this world in Torah mitzvahs much higher than anything they had when they were in Gan Eden before they came down. So that is the actual moment, the actual time of the passing. But we're talking about years later, we're talking about next year, we're talking about 10 years later, we're talking about 200 years later. How does that work? So he says, "Fisha b'chol shana chayzer menishnim oisam and yonim shoyu pamel shoynam hari b'chol shana yom ha'ilula shel tzaddik yom simcha." We know that the reason why we celebrate Yomim Tovim annually, every 15th of Nisan we celebrate Pesach, every 15th of Tishrei you celebrate Sukkot, etc., etc. Every 6th of Sivan you celebrate Matan Torah. It's because the same events recur. Everything that took place on a certain calendar date repeats itself on that calendar date in the spiritual sense. Therefore, when you have the day of the joy of a tzaddik, at the day of his passing, the Alter Rebbe passed away in Tavkuf Ayin Gimel, in what's that come out? Ayin is 1812. So, therefore, every year since 1812, it doesn't make a difference. That's many years since then. It's over, 200 years since 1812. Still in all, what we have is the power and the energy and the joy of what took place that first time when Alter Rebbe passed away repeats itself now as well. Now the Rebbe is going to add, this is what the Rebbe said applies to many tzaddikim. Now he's going to add that there's something unique about the Alter Rebbe, that by him this makes the Simcha even greater. Simcha negremes medavar chadash lo hayme olam hi gdoy lo yoser misimcha ba medavar shekvar haya. You could be happy about something that is a recurring event, something that happened before, or you could be happy from something that is completely new, and it's a totally different simcha. Who may be simcha, even aval shafilo b'yom ha'istalkos mamish ein ze davar chadash. Ein b'ze simcha tzumah k'vay binyin chadash habal l'rishayna. He's soon going to explain why the simcha by a passing is not necessarily something new, but we know this principle when it comes to Sheva Brachas. When it comes to Sheva Brachas, you cannot make all the special brachas associated with the Sheva Brachas if the same guests that were there by the wedding are there by a Sheva Brachas on a Tuesday. There's an idea that's called Panim Chadashis. You need to have a new face. You need to have a new guest. Why? Because for it to be considered a Simcha that needs or that has a purpose of making brachas, you have to have something new. But if you have the same people gathered around the same table, or it doesn't make a difference, different tables, but it's the same people celebrating with the same chasna and kala, it's already old stuff. It's not literally the same thing like here, but we have this concept that true joy is from something that's completely new. By the Alter Rebbe, it was really, really new, as opposed to a histalkus of other tzaddikim, as we'll soon explain. Roiv neshamas shel doiris elu eina neshamas chadashos. Like I like to call it, we are all environmentally friendly neshamas. We are recycled. On the back of our neshama, there's the recycled symbol. You guys don't know about it. In California, we have these cans with recycling on it. But over here in Florida, there's a helpnish from them, Baruch Hashem. So, can't get out of the habit. In my house, I still have one bin for recycling. Anyway, so the neshamas are also recycled. The vast amount and majority of neshamas these days are neshamas.
The factory's closed.
That's right. They don't make it anymore. So it's used. It's what they call refurbished or renewed. Isn't there a new thing? Renewed. That's even better quality.
This is like for Jewish people.
Yes. All the neshamas of Yidden are all reused, refurbished, renewed neshamas.
There's no original.
There's no, except for rare things. There were once upon a time here. B'meila, hasimcha ma'aliyah shemesalim b'shasa yistalkas eina kai gedoyla mishum sheina boyach lam lo rishoina. You have neshamas of even great tzaddikim, but that pass away, it's not going to be such a great simcha. Why? Because it's not the first time that they completed their mission here in this world. So since it's not the first time they completed their mission here in this world, so it's not such a great simcha because it's not something new. They had to raid their aliyah. It's true that it's not the same type of aliyah. Every single time the neshama comes down, it's a different quality, a different level. Kivan aval sheklolos inyan aliyah hayek kvar pametzla eina simcha koy gedoyla. It's not as great, it's not as high. Loikein nishmas shadmor azakin shahaisa neshama chadasha. The Frierdiker Rebbe establishes that Alter Rebbe was not a recycled neshama. He was a neshama that was totally new. Never been exactly. He was never down here. Lifnei shadmor azakin noilad loy hoysan nishmasei klal ba'olam hazeh. B'meilam be'eis istalkus shadmor azakin hoysa simcha rabba ma'od v'gedoyla ma'simcha shoysa be'eis istalkus atzadikim she'etzam loy hoy in neshama chadasha. True, there is a joy and a simcha by other tzaddikim's passing, but since by them they had come down here before, so the joy was not as powerful. Bishum shezehaya inichadosh, by the Alter Rebbe, it was something new, so that's why it's a greater joy. She'ira l'rishayna, it's the first time it happened. But again, even though it's the first time it happened in Tov Kuf Ayin Gimel, how do they know? So he says, this is something that the Frierdiker Rebbe has to reveal to us. Ka'amar li'il, chayzin v'nishnim b'deishana oisam minyanim shahayu b'pam rishayna. So what took place in 1812 takes place in 2025. B'chol shana kishmagia yom chavdala tevis yom p'tiris admor hazakin, when we come to this date, tonight, tomorrow, chavdala tevis, meir v'nimshach oisa simcha gedoyla, it shines that very great simcha, that very great joy. And the Rebbe adds, it's not the identical joy, but actually it increases. Every year, the Neshomah of the Tzaddik, the Alter Rebbe explains in the Geras HaKodesh, goes up, or Bechlali explains, every year there's an aliyah and a hamshacha and a revelation of divine energy and light that wasn't there in previous years. So, for example, the Rosh Hashanah of Tafshin Pei is a revelation of a light and power that wasn't there in Tafshin Pei Dalet, and wasn't there in Tafshin Dalet, and wasn't there in Tafresh Dalet, and so on. And all of these are going higher and higher. So the same thing, whatever revelation took place over 200 years ago when the Alter Rebbe passed away in 1812, now is so much more higher every year. It increases. So therefore the joy that comes along with it is also greater. Like you said, it's a great simcha, at least as, and even more so than the passing in Tavkuf Ein Gimel.
First pass.
So now the Rebbe is a very practical person and wants to say, so what does this mean for us? Okay, Chassidim always like to have a reason to fabring and say l'chaim and sing a nigun and dance. Fine, we have a reason to be happy. But the Rebbe also wants to bring it down that there's a practical application where this applies in our life, where the simcha impacts us. Simcha payres gather. That's the nature of joy. Joy breaks through barriers, boundaries. When a person feels constrained, a person feels trapped, a person feels they cannot get out of themselves, they cannot break through something that they're trying to get through. If a person is in a joyous state, he's in a happy state, this gives him the energy. He's in a different psychological, mental place. He's able to break through those challenges and those barriers. So the Rebbe says, Yitna Kodesh Baruch Hu, Shekol Elu Sheyesh Lam Shayches L'Admor HaZaken, Bein Elu Sheyesh Lam Elav Shayches Ruchnius, Shohelchem Baruch Hoysav, Im HaMaisa, Im HaDivur Machshava. Those people, the Rebbe is giving a bracha, that they are connected with the Alter Rebbe by following in his ways. And following in his ways could mean doing in action things that the Alter Rebbe encouraged and did himself, or speaking or learning words and things that the Alter Rebbe taught, or even thinking thoughts that the Alter Rebbe encouraged, and so on. That is one group of people that are like spiritual offspring of the Alter Rebbe. They are spiritual descendants of the Alter Rebbe. And then there's literal physical descendants. Bein elu shemoitza migeza shaloi. Those are Gej. Those are people that come out of the Alter Rebbe's planting. The Rebbe used to encourage. They would usually have a malav malka on Chavdal Tevis. Rabbi Butman was alive. I'm sure they did it for all the tzimtzayim. He's passed away, right?
This year.
What? I'm sure they're doing it. They wouldn't stop it. Right. So if they have for the Malav Malka, for the Tzetzoyim, the descendants of the Alter Rebbe. So the Rebbe is wishing blessings and brachas and for everything, including not just those that are spiritual descendants, but physical descendants. Because the father has the capability to give over, bring merit to his child. And this doesn't make a difference who the child is and how the child acts. We know, lahalacha, a son inherits from their father regardless of what their son's relationship with the father is. It could be that the son is a baby, a day-old baby. Doesn't really have a relationship, just a biological relationship. We don't care. Regardless of anything else the son might have done, or thought, or not done, or not thought, doesn't make a difference. It's automatic. So that's the Rebbe saying. It automatically is transmitted to those that are the descendants of the Alter Rebbe. Because he's a son, so automatically it's transmitted. So the Rebbe says that by all of those, both the spiritual descendants of the Alter Rebbe and the physical descendants, sheyusru etzlam kol hamedidas v'agbalus sheyumshach lahem kol hametztarach lahem bein begashmis bein beruchnis v'shetia hamshach loy kol manias ad meher yoretz dvaroi. So the Rebbe says that literally all brachas on this day of Chav Dalet Tevis should come down to them, whether in whatever they need in the material world and what they need spiritually. And again, the Alter Rebbe says this in the Yahrtzeit HaKodesh. He speaks about how the passing of a tzaddik brings down blessing to all of those that have some type of connection with the tzaddik. Upoil Yeshuas B'kerev Haaretz. This great cumulative effect of all his Torah mitzvahs that he did his entire life is not just something that impacts him, but it also impacts anyone that has a particular connection with him. Chassidim Chazer Devort benegeya that there's an idea of unhalten the klyamke from the Alter Rebbe, to hold on to the doorknob of the Alter Rebbe's room. What does it mean to hold on to the doorknob of the Alter Rebbe's room? Even you don't say Tachton on Yutas Kislev, that's considered holding on to the doorknob of the Alter Rebbe's room. But so it's not so hard, it's not so difficult to be able to participate and to have this connection with the Alter Rebbe. You learn a line in Tanya, you celebrate when it comes to Chavdal Tevis, you have a connection. The Rebbe says the Alter Rebbe will bring down to you all the brachas and all the material needs and all the spiritual needs to be able to break out of all our constrictions and limitations, again, both materially and spiritually, and in such a way that, like I said, Ad Meheri Yoris Dvari, that it comes quickly. Yitar HaKadosh Baruch Hu sheyiu holchem baruch choisav v'machshava dibra ma'is ad b'chaya yom yomim. So the Rebbe continues the bracha. When you have a bracha, you need the keli for the bracha. So just like you said before, those that follow in the Alter Rebbe's ways are considered like those that are going to receive this bracha. So Hashem, so the Rebbe gives us a bracha that everybody that learns this and listens to this should actually follow in his ways, in thought, speech, and deed, in their day-to-day life. Ubiyichud, specifically, sheyilmudu Torahs Achsidus, shalzeh masar ad morzoknes nafshay. The Alter Rebbe literally had been willing and ready to give up his life for that, so Chassidim should study Chassidus. Literally, he was arrested for it, and he could have theoretically been executed for the terrible crime of starting the Chassidic movement in Chabad Chassidus and teaching Chassidus. So the Alter Rebbe was ready, literally, to risk his life for us to be able to have this gift of Chassidus. And to also act in accordance with the directives of Chassidus. It shouldn't just be a mental exercise, but it should also influence the way we live our lives according to Chassidus. And again, sometimes we get like overwhelmed. Oh, we got to learn Chassidus, and we got to do machshava, dibra, ma'isa, day-to-day life. It's like we said before, unhalten the klamke, hold on to the doorknob. One thing, a line of Tanya, something, some type of connection, some type of custom, some type of idea that you're holding on and connecting with Alter Rebbe is a vehicle and a channel for all the brachas that are associated with this day of Dalet Tevis. Okay, that's one sikha. Now the next sikha, the Rebbe is going to explain a very well-known story. I'm sure all those children that coming home from LEC, I don't know, it didn't yet start the yeshiva vacation and the LEC, yeshiva week. So they must probably all going to come back home with this story. So you have a chance to hear the story before the kids tell it to you, with the way the Rebbe explains it. Dalet. The Alter Rebbe had a silver tabak pushkala, it used to be called, without a cover. It was people used to take a snuff. What's called the snuff had the people that could afford it would have like a silver case for holding the snuff. The Alter Rebbe obviously didn't have this because he spent money on it. This was given to him as a gift. Yes, and before cigarettes. So what did people do? They took a snuff of tobacco, and used to then give a good sneeze, or however it was, very geschmackig type of thing. So maybe many of you grew up in Shulm where you saw some old people walking around with a little snuff box. So the Alter Rebbe had as a gift from somebody the silver snuff box, but it didn't have a cover. Usually these things come with a cover. Practical reasons, you want to keep it fresh and so on. It was very shining. So he used to use it as a mirror. The Alter Rebbe didn't own his own mirror, but he had this cover of the tabak pushka, and he used it as something to be able to. Now we have phones, we can use that to be able to make sure that the tefillin is in the right place. Chassidim spoke about this in the Tzemach Tzedek's presence, and they broke. The Alter Rebbe broke off the cover. Amrat Tzemach Tzedek she'inyoni shel hasaba lo hoysa lishboy hu lo yishavar lo yasatzmei v'lo yasazulas el mistama hoya michse mechuber lekufsai dechut v'asaba hoytzis achut ha-mechaber. There was an approach amongst people who tried to find a means of becoming close to Hashem before Chassidus came along, before the Baal Shem Tov's teachings, before the Alter Rebbe, and that was to break down the body, to afflict the body. And this teaching, or this approach, the Baal Shem Tov discouraged, and the Alter Rebbe discouraged, and the Rebbe even more so. Don't afflict the body. And don't break others. In other words, the whole style of Musar and telling people how awful they are, and you're missing so much. And the same thing, some people could say, okay, others don't break. Others you have to lift up. Others you have to be nice to. But maybe myself, I really have to talk to myself with some strong words. So he said, the Alter Rebbe did not break others, nor did he break himself. Therefore, the Tzemach Tzedek said, it makes no sense that he would break the silver tabak pushka. There must have been like a connecting thread or a hinge, and he pulled that out, and that's how he separated it. Now, this is a very interesting idea that Rebbe is going to explain. True, the Alter Rebbe didn't spiritually do that, and yet the Tzemach Tzedek was so sure that this impacted the Alter Rebbe's physical treatment of a physical object. Eitla Tzemach Tzedek hayu kol kach batuach u'barer she'admur hazaken lo yishavar ad shezeh v'yoy lo yimer b'vadoy she'admur hazaken lo yishavar afilu doime mal rak hoytze achut ha-mechaber. You could think, okay, the Alter Rebbe would not break another Yid. The Alter Rebbe would not break himself. Here we're talking about an inanimate object. We're talking about something that seemingly has no feelings. Yet we see that Torah looks at the way we even treat an inanimate object as a lesson and an expression of how we're supposed to deal with higher forms. One of the famous examples is about the Mizbeach. The Mizbeach did not have stairs, it had a ramp, so that you shouldn't have a disrespectful gate that opens up the legs, which is considered disrespectful to go up to the Mizbeach. And Mefarshim talk about this. Say, what? The stones of the Mizbeach have no feelings. They're stones. What's the big deal about being disrespectful to a stone? Or we see this every Friday night. Every Friday night, and Shabbos day, we cover the challah. Why? So the challah shouldn't be embarrassed that we're making kiddush on the wine. So we see that in the worldview of a Yid, their spiritual relationship manifests itself also in the physical treatment, literally of physical objects. The challah on the table, the stones by the Mizbeach, cannot be disrespected. In a similar vein over here, the Alter Rebbe's attitude towards another person and even towards himself, the Tzemach Tzedek was sure, was reflected also in the way how he treated something, an inanimate object of seemingly no significance, just a snuff box. It's a lesson for us. אפשר לכוון את התפילין שבראש, שכוונת התפילין היא שיבוד המוח והלב לקדוש ברוך הוא. People might think the only way I can deal with my materialism, the only way I could deal with my nature is I just got to break it. Comes the Alter Rebbe and shows us that no, I can deal with myself in an uplifting, loving, and soft manner. I could deal with another Jew in an uplifting and soft and loving manner. And even to bring it to a state where it will be in service of Hashem. The Alter Rebbe used the silver cover of the Tabak Pushkala to be able to make sure that the tefillin were in the correct place. And the meaning of the mitzvah of tefillin is to make my mind and heart subservient to Hashem. So you can even reach a level of subservience to Hashem without needing to break, with using a soft touch, with using everything in a way that's elevating. We said before the Alter Rebbe removed the hinge. The Alter Rebbe pulled out the thread that connects. What does that mean spiritually? There's the godly soul and there's the animal soul. These are things that we just have to pull out the connection between them. Pa'amim mischaberes ha-Nefesh Habahamis ha-Nefesh Ho'elokis u'mefates ha-Adam sheyase ba'ofen shoyne ma'ashibed ha-mutlalav b'tayna shezeu kedusha. As a chut ha-machaber as a tzarech lahoitzi. Sometimes the Nefesh Habahamis tries to join with the Nefesh Ho'elokis, with the godly soul. And it tells it, you know what? Don't do what you're supposed to do for holy reasons. I've got holy and good reasons. It's connecting to the Nefesh Ho'elokis. It's giving, the Rebbe used to use the expression, as tutzachon nazayt nezupetze. The Nefesh Habahamis could dress himself up in a silk kaftan. He could look like a very holy and spiritual person, because the Nefesh Habahamis can often find for you spiritual reasons why not to do the right thing. So we need to realize, keep a distance. Make the Nefesh Habahamis' world and the Nefesh Ho'elokis' world separated. Pull out that pin. As a chut ha-machaber as a tzarech lahoitzi. Yesh ladas v'birur ma bo b'nefesh Ho'elokis ma bo b'nefesh Habahamis. A person needs to have clarity and know if this advice is coming from the animal soul. The Zohar calls it that there's freedom from foolishness. When we don't fool ourselves, after tefillin, you can make sure that the tefillin is in the right place. And this tefillin being in the right place, the Rebbe was fond of emphasizing that it says that the nations of the world will see Shem Hashem Nikra Alecha, that the name of Hashem is upon you, and then V'yarum Emeka. That's what he's saying. Achafilu Amei Haaretz, the nations of the world. Shebesaycha Adam v'gam elu animtzoim b'chelker ba'olam yiru Emeka. There is like the non-Jew within us, the Nefesh Habahamis, and then there's a non-Jew outside. When we wear tefillin, the Rebbe says, and this was one of the things that the Rebbe encouraged, the putting on the mitzvah tefillin, starting around the time of the 6 Day War, just before the 6 Day War, was to encourage this type of power that we have upon the nations of the world, and also on our own internal type of nations, that they should have the awe of Hashem, and by doing so, we don't need to break anything. We just have to have our mind and heart connected in the right place, and then we can accomplish what we need to accomplish.